Hello, everybody. I'm Ned Foy. I'm going to give a talk on Hazel, just an introduction. And just for clarification, I am not part of the Hazel Corporation or anything. I'm just, or Noodlesoft, just a user of their product and wanted to share a bit more about what I've learned about it and some of the things I like about it. Um, so we'll be, it's a pretty, there's a lot of power to this program, so I can only cover just some very light common uses and maintenance features. And the idea here is to give you a basic understanding of what it can do and generally how you make it work. And at the end of the talk, I'll point to some places where you can get more comprehensive lessons on this. And so we'll cover that then. So I'll take questions at the end, and we'll go from here. So the next thing, let's make sure. Okay. So the thing is, what Hazel is a pretty powerful program, but it is unusual and it is very much behind the scenes. It helps to organize and move your files around based on the way you want it to work. And it is for Mac only. It's heavily file based, and until recently, had really no access to files on the iPad. So let's see. And what do people use Hazel for typically? They use it to do all kinds of things that they want in their organization system. I mean, anything from moving their files off the desktop to cleaning out their downloads folder, keeping, identifying and sorting out files like PDFs and filing things, identifying old files to archive, and all sorts, anything to do with file management that you normally have to do by hand, Hazel can do it automatically for you. So how it works, I mean, this is where it gets to be a little unusual, and that Hazel is controlled almost entirely through the System Preferences pane. So when you install Hazel, you will see a new item in the Preferences pane, and you click on it, and you will see this. And it is there's actually three tabs to this, as you see at the top here. There's folders, there's a trash one where you can manage this trash settings, and there's a general info screen here. And so, but most of the work that you ever do with Hazel is done from the folders tab. That's the main interface right here. So when you're dealing with telling Hazel what to do, I mean, the first thing the way the UI works here is this folder section highlighted is you identify what folder you're interested in defining what you want Hazel to do. So if you want Hazel to do something on your downloads folder, you would identify it here. And then when you want to tell Hazel what you want to do in that folder, then you work in this pane here, which is the rules pane. So it gets into how you tell Hazel what you want it to do. So like you saw in the interface, you have a place where you define the folder, and then the rules have two parts. There's setting up the condition, what kind of files do you want to do something with, and the action, what you want to do with those files. So when you're defining a new rule for Hazel, or essentially telling Hazel, giving it an action, there's some basic things here that you can just define, name. But the main part here is, here's where you tell Hazel what files you're interested in. What are the characteristics of those files? It can have, one or more characteristics. You might like to say, I care about the PDFs, or I care about documents, and so, or specific extensions or whatever. And then you can also say, here's what I want you to do with those files. Like, so we'll get into more details and examples, but this is just how the interface is laid out. So when you get down to it, Hazel is like the easiest possible automation that you'll ever find. There's no programming in here. It's always running in the background. And once you tell Hazel something that you'd like to do, it's always doing it. It doesn't require you to take any action, not even a hotkey or anything. It just watches in the background, and when it sees that situation arise, it takes action based on the way you've defined it. Okay, so for a very basic example, I'll have Hazel set up a rule for Hazel to clear off any files on your desktop and move them to a folder. As everyone knows, it's way too common for people to get a ton of stuff on their desktop without in pretty short order. Okay, so here is the interface, and then the first thing we need to do to define when we want to tell Hazel to clear our desktop is we have to define where. So we have to tell Hazel, yeah, we want to deal with the desktop. So we'll go to the plus button here. We select desktop, and we say open. So now we have defined that we're talking about the desktop here. And then the next part is to talk about set up a rule, and we want that rule to move a file off the desktop and move into a folder. So how we do that? It looks like this. Essentially, go and add a rule for this folder, and we're going to name it. We'll call it like move desktop files. And then so we'll say if, and we'll want all the files. So we'll go down to the bottom here and say any file. And that kind of covers everything. So we're going to say every file. And then so we want it to move, and we want it to move it to a different folder. Yeah. So I have a folder on the desktop called desktop files, and I will stick that here. And then that's it for that rule. So now we've defined a full rule. So the folder is desktop, and the rule is move desktop files. Right now, in order to see this in action, we can move on to the next part here. And so what I have right here is my screen, what my desktop looks like. I have some screenshots sitting on the desktop. I have the folder that they'll be moved into, and I've also opened the folder up so you can see there's nothing inside it right now. And when after I activate that rule in Hazel, then we can watch this go to work. So then you see all the files vanish from my desktop, and they get put into the stored desktop files folder. So this is like a very simple example of what you can do with Hazel. And the fact is, it just works in the background constantly. So, but that's just to give you a flavor of how you set up a simple rule. All right, so to make it a little more interesting, we'll do another example. And instead of moving every single file on the desktop, we'll go to download folders, and we're just going to move up only the DMGs to their own folder. So in this case, we'll be working with not the desktop folder, but we'll be working with the downloads folder. So we'll need to tell Hazel about the downloads folder. We go here, we add another folder, we add the downloads folder. Okay, and then the next thing to do is we need to now add the rule that says take the DMGs and move them into a different folder. And DMGs are interesting. I mean, we're looking at downloads folder, and what people normally will do is they'll download a sample program, and you don't want it to instantly be moved to an archive. You want some time for it to sit there so you can use it and play with it. So in this rule, we'll set it up a little bit of a time delay so it doesn't happen instantly. So we'll set up the rule. So from downloads folder, we'll add a rule. We'll call the rule archive folder DMGs. And so we're going to say, okay, what kind is this file? And we want a disk image file. So it has to be a disk image file. And we want it to be sitting in that folder for over a week. So if it hasn't been around for a week, so we say date added is not in the last, say, 7 days. Okay, so if it's a DMG and it's been there longer than 7 days, then we want it to move to an archive. So our action is going to be move. We don't change that. We click here and we select archive DMGs. And then that's all we need to do. We're done. So hit OK. All right, so at this point, you can see that each folder has its own set of rules that come up in the rules pane. All right, so we're going to run that example so you can see how that looks. So here's my downloads folder, and we will, show you what happens after I activated Hazel. And there's lots of DMGs in this directory, and then Hazel just removed them all. So now there's no more DMGs here, and it's left over with whatever files were there that were not DMGs. And the DMGs, by the way, were moved off to a folder called archive DMGs. Okay, so you can move just a specific type of folder, and we can get even a little more specific to the kind of folders, files we're going to move and identify. So here's what's left in my downloads folder, right? There's bunches of PDFs of random types. And I notice, there's one type that I have. There's something called retirement report, which I get sent occasionally by a friend who puts these out once or every month or so. And so I'd like to set up a rule that moves these out of the downloads folder into their own directory. So you can see these are the files that I'm going to try to set up a rule for. So not only am I going to just say I'm not going to move every PDF. I'm going to set up a rule that tries to be more specific and identifies just these particular files, even though they come with different dates. So we'll go here. We're going to create a new rule. So it's in the downloads again. Create a second rule for downloads. And we'll call this retirement reports. And then we can say, well, if kind is PDF, right, we want to be specific here. And we're going to have a second condition. The name contains the words retirement report. Okay, so, and then if it does, then we want to move it to that retirement report folder. So I will select the retirement report folder, which is in the documents. It's a little clipped here, sorry about that. So select that folder. Okay, and then that should do it. Right, so now I will activate that rule, and we will see that work. And so you can see right now retirement reports folder is empty. Downloads folder still has stuff in it. Whoops, a little premature there. Okay. Try that again. Okay, so now I'll activate Hazel. Hazel will look around. Notice I have some files that match that and should move them. Yeah, okay. So those 4 files are now moved out of the downloads and into the retirement reports folder. So yeah, and so you see that they're no longer in the downloads. While you're developing a rule, you can use the toolbar to turn Hazel rules off and on so that you have a chance to set things up and try it out. It's just not recorded. Okay. One other thing that Hazel can do that is really very helpful is that it has a way that you can automatically rename your files the way you would like them to be set up. So I've had situations where, I mean, sometimes doing the date that that file was made was really important, and you want to actually add it to the name of the file rather than relying on the date created and everything, because sometimes it crosses media and computer operating systems that may get lost. And you have a picture from 20 years ago and you don't want to know when that date was. You don't want it to go away. So sometimes it's useful to rename files to have the date of creation right in the file name. So we'll do that here as an example. So here, I'm going to create another rule for downloads. And in this case, I'm going to add a date to, it's a PG&E file that I have as a PDF. And so the name contains acidic gas. Then I can then rename this. And then I'll rename it with a certain pattern. And I want to include the creation date in it at the beginning. So I'll drag the creation date over and put it at the beginning. Now, of course, you can customize how that date shows up. So you can use a little caret there and say edit date pattern. And then go in, and I just want the month and the year and the month. I don't need the individual day for, say, some monthly bill. So I'm going to delete the day here. And then I'll reformat a little bit to put a space in between the month and the file name. So then you can see down here at the bottom, it shows you how it would probably look. And that looks about what I'm trying to do here. So that will rename the file with the date in front. So let's say that's done. And say OK. All right, so now the downloads folder has 3 rules, 3 actions that it performs. And we will try out the PG&E file name one. Okay, so let's see. So we're going to, you can see I've got two PG&E files in my downloads thing, and it doesn't say PG&E, but it has it all spelled out. And we'll activate Hazel on there, and you notice that on date modified here on the side, it does say July 17, 2017, and so it renamed those files to include the year and month that those files were created in right in the name. So there's a lot you can do with renaming files that is very useful for filing things here. And this just kind of scratches the surface of what you can do. And not only could you rename this, but I could have also then added a second action that said, oh, move this to my PG&E, right? And maybe even sort it by year. So it becomes a very useful thing if you receive receipts or you save things as PDFs from printing, and you can set up Hazel to change a name to what makes sense to you and put it where you want it. So I could go on and on with examples on this, but there are a lot more things it can do. I won't be giving specific examples for, but some of the things that it can do in addition to these sort of things is it can add or change tags on files. So you may, rather than moving it, change the tag, the file, change the color, something meaningful to you. You could make an alias and put it somewhere. What's really interesting is you can, instead of necessarily qualifying a file by looking at the name and the date of a file, you can actually tell it to look inside a file and say, how many times, I mean, once in a while, I will get someone where I save something that is an important receipt, and it will say receipt.pdf in my downloads folder. And it's like, that's pretty useless as a file name. So what Hazel can do is I can tell Hazel, instead of looking at the name and saying, oh, Pacific Gas, I can say, well, look inside the file, and does it say PG&E in the file? Does it say PG&E statement? And if it does, find the date associated with that within the file, and then rename the file to include the date that was in the statement. So, and you can be very specific, so you're not getting false positives by saying, make sure it says PG&E statement, or make sure it says invoice. And you can have that as a rule, and then you can have that rename sequence, and then you can then push it into a folder that you want. And then you can do that process over again for other kinds of important documents that you want to keep track of. So another thing that Hazel will do is being able to not only just move it to a pre-existing folder, but it can create and generate subfolders. So if you want to like create subfolders by year or type or anything like that, it will go ahead and create that for you, so that, I want to have all my PG&E statements from 2020 in the 2020 subfolder, and 2019 and 2018, and then it will go ahead and file them that way for you. So it has a lot of ways that you can help organize your stuff. There's also syncing, so that you can essentially have Hazel be selective about what kind of file it can sync with another folder. It could be on some shared place, or I don't know. It's really, you can just be creative with it. And there's a long list of things Hazel can do. I mean, you can use it to import pictures into photos. So maybe you've got an SD card, and you drop your SD card files into something that will be backed up, but also you want it to import it into photos automatically. You can set it up to do that. You can do the same kind of thing with music. You can do the same thing with videos and the Apple TV. You can have Hazel, as part of his actions, run any kind of automation. We talked about the subfolders. You can have upload files to a server. There's just all kinds of things you can do. It is really it is just depending on how deep you want to go. But the nice thing about Hazel is it doesn't have to be any more complicated than what I've already demonstrated, and you can get a fair amount of utility out of it. And if you want to dig deeper into it, you can dig deeper, and it will probably do what you want. As a separate part of the moving files around and renaming them and the like, they do have some separate specific features that have handling of the trash and cleaning up a deleted application cruft. So handling of trash is interesting because right now the Mac trash can is like you put it in there and you empty it out, and I think you can set it for a certain time. But with Hazel, you can set it so that you can have it, Hazel monitor your trash and say, if it's been in the trash more than X days, delete that one file. Or if it's causing this new file is over a gigabyte, delete it immediately or delete it sooner. And so you can set it up so you can Because I mean, the whole point of having a trash can instead of deleting it instantaneously is to have a safety net. And the nice thing about having a safety net where if you just put something in there that is important just a day ago and you're trying to get rid of stuff from 30 days ago, you're not wiping it all out at the same go. So um, that's a pretty nice little feature they have in there. They have a few other options. And they also do, you can enable the cleanup of deleted apps, which is essentially, several other programs have this feature too, but um, programs, when you install them, they tend to put little bits and pieces themselves all around, and Hazel keeps track of this. And when you actually put a deleted app, when you delete an app in the trash, it will go in and clean up all those other pieces that the app didn't clean up. So it's quite a lot there that you can do with it. So if you're interested, you actually can get this. This is at Noodlesoft. You can actually try this for a limited time trial for free. I believe it's 14 days, and see if you like it. It's not expensive at $32, and the license is good for, I think, 2 Macs at that price. They also have family packages and other things. It is a one-man shop. Paul King, he's been around for a long time, and definitely has produced a good quality product here. And if you want to learn more about Hazel, there are 2 places I'd recommend checking out. The main place, MacSparky, has got a great field guide for Hazel. You can check that out at macsparky.com. It's $29. You can watch like a 15-minute first part of the thing to see if you like it. That's available for free as well. And there is a 1 or 2 episodes of Screencast Online where you can find a deeper dive into Hazel as well. But really, if you followed this presentation, you can do some pretty useful things even without having lessons. But if you want to dive deeper, that stuff's out there. It's really good.